I always was interested in how things work. And there's so many electronic and electrical gadgets around our houses these days, perhaps even more than we realize. It's startling every time you look at your Wi-Fi router and you realize how many devices are connecting to it from within the house. So that interest in how things work and wanting to understand how all these gadgets are put together led me ultimately down that path. Even early on, I was in high school tinkering with electronics in various forms. I had a really primitive little computer called the ZX Spectrum, and I was proud of the fact that it had 48 kilobytes of memory. These days, we live in a world where 32 gigabytes of memory is no longer considered sufficient. So it's truly astonishing how, even just in my lifetime, these things have exploded in terms of their capability, not by 10 or 20%, but 1,000-fold and even 1,000,000-fold in the case of that memory example. I think it really enriches your perspective and your understanding of, on the one hand, the diversity of cultures and how interesting it is to be exposed to people with different perspectives and from different backgrounds. But also, I think it, to me at least, emphasized the fact ultimately that there are some core values that are common to all of us and that bring us together, even across cultures and even from very different backgrounds. A place like Cambridge in particular is the destination for so many people from all across the world. And the opportunity to be in a college where I think at one point they published that over 70 languages was being spoken at that time was just astonishing. So I thought it was a real privilege and a really enriching experience to be exposed to such an extraordinary diversity of cultures. Well, Cambridge was a distant dream until I managed to get a scholarship in my final year at the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa that allowed me to go there. There was a trust fund that had been created almost a century previously by a mining magnate in South Africa. And with this, they were able to send one person to Cambridge every year. In fact, it was a choice between Cambridge or Oxford or Imperial College. In the end, thrilled that I chose Cambridge. It was a truly wonderful little town in which to spend time. And there's just so many historically interesting things that happened there. In the college, right next to mine in Cambridge is where Isaac Newton was, and his original manuscripts are still in the library there. Walking to and from the engineering department, I would walk past the physics department, and every now and again I'd see famous physicists walking down the street discussing some interesting things. So it was a really interesting time. Plus, of course, there's the river Cam that flows right through the center of town. And so in summer, people are on punts all along the river, and you drink warm English beer and enjoy everything that England has to offer. It was quite a journey and all of it unplanned, but I'm happy to say all of it really exciting. I started off with a little startup company in London. And then following that, I got the opportunity to join a management consulting firm in New York, which was remarkably interesting. They had to teach me to think very differently in engineering, and certainly in engineering research. You're often interested in what happens 1% of the time, because that's going to reveal some new insight. In business, you're more interested in what happens 80% of the time. So it's a big mindset shift. But these folks were patient and good at instilling those sorts of insights and capabilities. From them, I ended up leaving to join an investment bank, Lehman Brothers, no less, with impeccable timing about 18 months before their untimely demise. And then from there, I actually had a stint in retail, where I was part of the turnaround team at Sears and Kmart, running two of the businesses there. And ultimately from there, I got the offer to join a staffing company that was making its living in science and in engineering and technology. And the opportunity to step back into a more technical world, where at least a part of our focus is on providing technical solutions, was one that was simply too good to pass up. I'd begun to really miss some of the technical elements of my original background. And since then, I've been in the staffing space. Of course, today at Kelly, responsible for our science and engineering, technology, and telecom businesses. So it's a wonderfully interesting portfolio of businesses to be involved in. I think it helps in two ways. On one hand, I have some appreciation for the technical challenges that our clients are trying to solve. And therefore, in client conversations or in thinking about putting together client solutions, I think having an understanding of some of the technology underlying it is helpful. But also more broadly, the one thing engineering in part, an engineering degree in part, is a pretty decent analytical basis. And so I've always aimed to use some of those analytical skills in how we run the businesses that I'm involved in and how we make decisions and how we plan for the future. Makes it truly something that we can stand by when we say we are experts at hiring experts is the fact that so many of our recruiters and our salespeople have a technical background themselves. It could be a formal technical background. We employ many engineers and computer scientists and life scientists in our various roles. It could also simply be a passion for the space and many years experience working in the space. But I think what I can unequivocally say is that between the folks with very strong academic backgrounds in the space and the people who have been working in the space for many, many years, the level of expertise that we have are, I believe, unparalleled in our industry. And we're able to put it to use, on the one hand, in our conversations with clients to accelerate our understanding of what they're trying to do. That is what we've been told by clients. When they talk to people from Kelly, the conversation is different because we instantly are able to relate to their technical objectives and technical challenges and are able to translate that into a talent solution. Similarly, we hear from candidates is the same thing, that when they speak to recruiters or people from our team in Kelly, the people they speak to are clearly experienced, deeply experienced in the sort of work that they have done and are going to do. And therefore, it's very quickly a very deep and a very expertise-driven conversation, which ultimately leads to a much more sophisticated outcome. That's something that we will continue to double down on top of the fact that we have folks with these sorts of technical backgrounds and technical experience. We are continually deploying training. We have folks whose sole job it is to stay on the cutting edge of all these various disciplines and then translate the latest developments into training for everybody that is in the client or a candidate-facing role, so that our teams can always speak to some of the latest technical developments out there and really understand what the trends are shaping the environment that our clients and our candidates operate. So I'm really thrilled and privileged to be the executive sponsor of the Veterans Affinity Group at Kelly. I think the more we can be conscious of the role that is played and the sacrifices that is made by our veterans, by those men and women who serve in all the various branches of our armed forces, ultimately the better as a society that we can reincorporate them into civilian life at those times and when they ultimately choose to do so. Veterans offer extraordinary skills, technical skills, but also remarkable degrees of discipline and needless to say, courage. And there are so many roles in the private sector where those skills are tremendously valued and they can be put to great use, ultimately to play a tremendously productive role in the economy. But it's not always completely easy to make that transition, either for employers or for veterans, because there's almost a mapping process necessary to understand how all these extraordinary skills they've accumulated can ultimately be utilized most effectively in the private sector. And as Kelly as a company, we're very committed to facilitating that process and to be truly a destination employer for veterans. We have a large number in the company already, a large number of veterans. We have a number of veterans serving in senior positions in the SET business. And in general, we are just proud and grateful that these men and women have chosen Kelly as their home, and we want to show our appreciation in turn by making it a wonderful place for them to have a career. So in terms of trends in the staffing industry over the next year or so, I think there are a number of different factors that's going to be very significant in shaping the future of the staffing industry. On the one hand, I do think clients are increasingly looking to staffing companies to provide not just classic staff augmentation people, but solutions. And I think that trend will continue and probably even accelerate. And therefore, I think staffing companies able to package their services in the form of solutions and even solutions delivering particular outcomes are going to have an advantage. And most staffing companies will have to adapt to that kind of mode of purchasing these sorts of services from clients. I think another interesting factor is technology. A great deal of what we do in the staffing industry on a daily basis, whether it is to read a resume or to reformat a resume or to create a job posting from a client requirement, a lot of those sorts of text manipulation activities, insight driven text manipulation, but nonetheless activities where you're effectively writing and reading and rewriting, will now be heavily supplemented by some of the emerging technologies such as generative AI and dramatically accelerated. I think therein lies both challenges for us, but also really significant opportunities. If we, by using these sorts of capabilities, can allow our recruiters and our salespeople to spend more time on the high value part of their days, which is to talk to clients and to candidates and to figure out how people's careers can be enhanced by putting them in touch with clients doing really exciting things, and how we can make clients more successful by creating the right kind of talent pools to support them. Those are wonderful ways to spend your day. And if you can spend more hours in the day doing that and less hours in the day doing things like reformatting resumes or writing job postings and rewriting job postings to get the tone just right and so on, that can only mean we become more productive and more successful. I think it does impose burdens on us to be really thoughtful about how we introduce these technologies, to be really agile and nimble in terms of pivoting how we work, to rapidly make these sorts of capabilities available to our teams and to train them on how to use them appropriately. There are also, of course, risks inherent in some of these technologies in terms of the data that you're potentially exposing if you're not careful. And also, you have to be very careful to make sure that there are no biases, implicit or otherwise, that creep in. But as long as you're mindful of those, ultimately, I think these technologies are going to be harbingers of a tremendous boost in productivity in our industry and ultimately shaping jobs in our various functions to be much more fulfilling and interesting. I think my first piece of advice for folks aiming to pursue a career in science, engineering, or telecom is that you've made a phenomenal choice. Congratulations. There are so many interesting things being done and so many interesting areas. The beauty of it is, even as your passion for the technology itself or for the science itself and the underlying disciplines have led you to the space, ultimately, it's great if you can find an equal passion for applying these technologies and these capabilities to make the world a better place. And whether you're choosing to focus on deploying broadband services in rural America, or utilizing your scientific skills to develop new ways of removing plastic from the oceans, or converting solar power into electricity, or using your engineering skills to optimize wind turbines or create self-driving vehicles. There are simply so many different areas where you can have a phenomenal impact on society. That the fact that you have the underlying technical skills opens this world of opportunity for you to have a very fulfilling career and also wake up in the morning knowing that you're making a difference in the world. It is interesting as businesses look to acquire technical talent that even though we are seeing some general economic headwinds at the moment, which no doubt will turn into a growth economy again in the coming quarters. But even as we're seeing some of these headwinds right now, it is still a very tight labor market. And there are still significant skill shortages. And looking to the future, that's the one thing I'm quite certain of. It is going to be a talent-driven market for decades to come. The projections of skill shortages, especially in the technical space, simply continue to expand, grow. And therefore, businesses seeking to acquire top-notch technical talent will have to be really thoughtful about their value proposition. Increasingly, technical talent are not just looking for interesting technical challenges, but they're also looking to understand how it will ultimately make a difference in them. And so companies should understand not just what they're trying to do, but also why they're trying to do it, and be able to really articulate that to prospective talent so that folks understand not just what their job's going to be, but how their job is going to make a difference. But the companies able to articulate both those things will ultimately have a significant advantage in this race to talent that's going to persist for many years.